But that was a very, very weird ending to what was pretty interesting battle in qualifying because, well, out of nowhere, Max Verstappen decided to abort his lap and his final lap, in fact, you should say, because I don't think he had the time, but he absolutely didn't push after the first sector. He aborted the lap. There was seemingly nothing wrong with the car, and I don't think that it would have made much difference if he had carried on. But I mean, he was already third fastest. He aborted the lap, but the big talking point is the fact that the first ever Miami Grand Prix, and in fact the first time that Formula One has raced in this particular venue since 1959, and in fact it wasn't even the Miami Grand Prix, then they raced in Florida, but it wasn't Miami. So the first time that Formula One has returned to the American state of Florida since 1959, and it's a Ferrari 1-2 pole. That's not exactly the most shocking thing if we've seen, based on the form, but it is pretty interesting because the last couple of races, Red Bull had started to claw back just a little bit, if you look at it that way. But unfortunately, it seems like it's advantage Charles Leclerc once again going into what is sure to be a very, very interesting Miami Grand Prix. Now, obviously, that isn't the only talking point that we have here because if you know, Carlos Sainz, by the way, a very, very good weekend for him and he needed it. But I think even he would be a little disappointed with the fact that he didn't take pole position because he did at one point seem set for it. He had a very good first sector on his final lap, very good second sector. Final sector just kind of, he was a little slower than Leclerc, and at the end, that's what counts. Leclerc is now on pole, but Sainz, considering the kind of luck that he'd been having in the last two races, both in Australia as well as at Emilia-Romagna, I think he'd take, finishing in second place in qualifying and maybe deciding, or maybe, putting himself in the best position to give his teammate Charles Leclerc a bit of a run for his money. This was a very important weekend for Sainz because, as we know, the Spaniard has been, in fact, last season he did outscore Leclerc in the Ferrari, but this season so far around, he's been left to bite the dust as far as, trailing Leclerc is concerned. So obviously that's a bit harsh on him, but the simple fact, especially considering that a lot of his own performances haven't necessarily been down to bad performances, let's say, it's just been down to poor luck. And his luck hasn't exactly been at its best in that regard, but, they say sometimes you just have to go out there and make your own luck. Sainz has done that for the most part in this particular race, but we don't know that, whether or not he would actually be able to convert this and maybe put in a bit of put some pressure on Charles Leclerc. Because again, remember, Miami, this is a street circuit. It will not be too easy to, in fact, overtake. So we have to remember that even if I think a good start on Sunday would be key for Carlos if he has to actually put the pressure on Charles Leclerc, because otherwise he could very well be in for a very long race of just following. But again, we'll see exactly how that goes tomorrow. The Red Bulls of Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez, third and fourth respectively. And well, again, I say that Verstappen pulling out of his lap there, bit unusual. I didn't really have much idea what exactly was going on there. But again, let's wait and see what exactly the explanation is there. Might just do another video on it. Sergio Perez in fourth. And an interesting subplot, by the way, Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo is in fifth place ahead of his former Mercedes teammate Lewis Hamilton, who is currently sitting in sixth place. A very interesting weekend and mixed weekend for both these teams because, as we know, the Alfa Romeo Zhou Guanyu could not make it out of Q1, but Bottas made it into Q3. Lewis Hamilton, again, good weekend for him considering the last two weekends he kind of got outperformed by George Russell, finished sixth here. But again, mixed weekend all around. I think the best team otherwise besides these, the team would be happiest with qualifying would of course be Alpha Tauri, as both of their drivers were in the top 10. Pierre Gasly finishes 7th, Yuki Tsunoda 9th, the top 10 rounded off by Lando Norris in 8th, and Lance Stroll in 10th position. So Sanket Joshi asks, what is wrong with Daniel Ricardo this season? That's a very good question, honestly, but the simple fact of the matter is that if you're asking me, I don't quite think he's gotten to grips with that McLaren yet. He struggled with it for the large parts of last season, and now this time around, remember, it's very much a case of new cars because again, the 2022 cars are very, very different from the 2021 cars. And I think his bad form from last season, I mean, he did win a race last year, which was McLaren's first in a number of years. But the fact is that his form, for the large part, he was outperformed by Norris, and that hasn't, transpired this time around as well. He's been left to bite the dust by Norris. Norris has been quite clearly the better driver, and he continued that run today, Lando Norris. So, fun fact, by the way, about the McLarens is that the last time F1 raced in Florida, it was in fact a McLaren that ended up winning. In fact, it wasn't a McLaren, it was the man eponymous with the team, Bruce McLaren, who won the race in Florida. Whether or not Lando could repeat that feat, well, that kind of remains to be seen. But, again, not bad for him finishing 8th. However, as we were mentioning earlier, the bigger losers, Daniel Ricardo in 14th, big shock. Seb Vettel in 13th, George Russell in 12th. So, I mean, a bit of a this there. Rajni Jha says, I thought you guys will come with Spurs versus Liverpool. Yep. The thing is that I did think about that as well. But then again, there's still some ways to go in the season. Although I will agree with you that was not a good result for Liverpool at all. You cannot be dropping points at this point of the season. They need all the points that they can get. And now suddenly the title race is out of their hand. Because if tomorrow City end up winning, well, then it's very much advantage City again. So Mithupalli Nivas asks, what happened to Max last lap? That's a very good question. I kind of wish I could give you an answer, but let me just quickly check on that, whether or not he said anything. So far, I can't really see anything on the web in terms of if he thought something was wrong with the car, or if, because there was nothing really off with the car in terms of, he ended the lap just fine. He didn't actually take the car into the pits. He trundled around at the end. So I really don't know what went wrong there. Maybe he just felt that he wasn't getting it and he aborted the lap. That seems more like it. But, the simple fact is, and this is something that Charles Leclerc pointed out in the post-match interviews as well. He said that the Red Bulls are much quicker on the straights, but the Ferraris are indeed quicker around the corner. So this is going to be a very interesting race because, the straights are the best place to overtake, but there are a lot of bendy corners. So I think the Ferraris have a slight advantage, especially considering they are starting up front. Tarun Pradhan says he said he made a mistake. Yeah, that actually did seem like it, because there was no reason for him to abort that lap otherwise, because he knew it was a case of one and done. I mean, with the kind of time they had left, they couldn't have really done anything else. So he knew that with that lap not there, P3 was pretty much secure at that point. Maybe he decided it wasn't worth it. Sanket Joshi is asking, who will finish on the podium tomorrow according to you? Well, that's a very interesting question, but I'm predicting a Ferrari 1-2. I'm leaving third place open because, you might say it would be one of the Red Bulls, but Red Bulls have been plagued with a little bit of reliability, and we did see their engine kind of catch on fire during one of the practice sessions. So again, can't really say too much about if one of the Red Bulls will finish, but if one of the Red Bulls does indeed end up finishing the race, I would say it'll be one of Sergio Perez or Max Verstappen who takes third place. Obviously, I think Red Bull and Verstappen fans would hope that if he can't indeed take the win of Charles Leclerc, that he would take the second place of Carlos Sainz. But again, remember, Sainz very much the man with the point to prove, simply because, well, he would want to be actually, putting his hand up and saying, hey, you know what? I know that Charles Leclerc has done a good job so far, but don't forget about me. And I think I could be the guy who would be able to lead your title hunt. Whether or not that's actually true, we'll see that. And as Mithupalli points out, that Red Bull is fastest in the middle sectors in practice and qualifying. That's correct. And the middle sectors is indeed where there is that one nice long little straight. So it does kind of back up the point that, they are much faster in the straights. But when it comes to the bendy parts of the circuit, it is the Ferraris that are quicker. So we'll wait and see how that race goes. But, I think there were a lot of people who, and I was one of them, you can count me there, who was expecting a bit of a Mercedes resurgence because, as we know, they did bring a few upgrades, a couple of wing upgrades to the Miami Grand Prix, but obviously those haven't really sorted out their major issues in terms of catching up with the rest of the pack. In fact, when I say the rest of the pack, I mean, of course, the front runners. So nothing there, but I think given all the circumstances, I think they'll take a P6 for Lewis Hamilton. George Russell will have a bit of a struggle in that race tomorrow, starting P12. Never easy on a street circuit, simply because you do not want to be chasing. That is pretty much the whole point when it comes to it. As for other teams, well, we know that the midfield is muddled, and if anyone of you is wondering why Esteban Ocon didn't start, it's because he had a bit of a shunt at turn 14 in the final practice. So his chassis suffered a bit of a crack, and he couldn't take to qualifying, so he was eliminated beforehand. He'll be starting tomorrow's race in 20th. It will be interesting to see how he does from there. And one of the key things is that, of course, the other talking point, which I feel is worth mentioning, Mick Schumacher ended up out-qualifying his teammate for the first time. Now, obviously, it's not that much of a big deal for some, but I think, the fact that he managed to make it to Q2 whilst Magnussen ended up getting knocked out in Q1, big deal for him, no doubt. I think that's something he'd be happy with, especially considering that many were already beginning to have a few questions over his, ability or whatever. So Giant Slayer says that overtaking is difficult. Result will be decided after one lap itself, I think. That is, I mean, I would normally say there's a pessimistic outlook, but street circuits can be a little tough to overtake on. And as we saw, besides the straights, I mean, a lot of the parts where the multiple turns are very, very narrow. So I don't think you're right. It's very possible we're not going to see that much overtaking action. But again, let's wait and watch to see how tomorrow goes. Personally, I'm excited that, this race is happening. It's the first time race. But again, it's very possible that by the end of it, when I'm back discussing this with you guys tomorrow, I too might be saying the same thing, saying, hey, you know what, it was a bit of a boring race, bit of a procession. But let's wait and watch. Let's see how this goes. I mean, so again, to sum it up, big news is that it's a Ferrari 1-2 heading into the first ever Miami GP. And the two Red Bulls follow suit. Max Verstappen at third, Sergio Perez at fourth. Should be an interesting race, if for nothing else, the novelty factor, because, I mean, this is the first time we're seeing the Miami street circuit in all of its glory. And so, if you, like me, are an F1 fan, I'm sure that you would be interested in finding out how exactly the race goes. But that's for tomorrow. When I say tomorrow, I mean, obviously, Sunday night / Monday morning. So I will see you guys then. And of course, I'll see you guys before that as well, because, IPL doubleheader there. There's going to be some other stuff happening too. Whatever it is, whatever is happening in the world of sports, you can best believe we'll be there to cover. Yes, Divyanshu Samal, bye-bye. Good night, all of you. Thank you all for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, again, don't forget to like, share the video with your friends, leave us a few comments, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and don't forget that we will always be here with you guys, joining you during, before, and after every major sporting event that's happening. So again, tomorrow, plenty of stuff going to be going on Sunday. Big day coming. I'm excited. I hope you guys are too. But for now, I really need a little bit of sleep. So I will see you all tomorrow. Good night. Bye-bye.